On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
How should we think about Jewish leadership? Do we ask too much of our rabbis? Should people be more Jewishly literate? We discuss all of this, plus a little detour into astrology, prophecy in this week's Torah portion, and more. I'm Avi Feingold, and along with Yedida Eisenstadt and Matthew Leibel, we are not in heaven. Hi all, how's it going?
Are you talking to us?
Yeah, folks. I'm trying to mix it up a bit. Okay, let's start it again.
That was good. I think we could go for that. I like that very, very much. It's going great.
Yedida, what's up?
Good. Just, my kids are in their third week of Chabad camp here, which they are just loving. This morning, I may have parked beside a fire hydrant for 30 seconds to get my kids on the bus. And my daughter said to me, "That's not a kosher space." So I'm getting a kick out of that.
I love it.
You're held to a higher standard now that you're a rabbi. You can't make violations of kosher space like that now.
My daughter is the parking police. She's 6, so.
Yeah. How's it going for you, Avi?
It's going all right. I'm back in the U.S. It was a good week in Canada. I'm back in Canada a lot this summer, which is good for me. I'm feeling good about that. The interesting thing, I was in Montreal and I actually had a lot of people reach out to me, call me, email me, and some people just when they saw me in Shul and Shabbat were like, hey, thank you for that podcast last week about Federation, because according to a lot of them, there was like a feeling of like, thank you for saying the things that a lot of people cannot say. That was kind of cathartic and interesting to hear. I mean, I did have some critiques that we didn't have Federation on to explain their side of things.
Yeah, I've heard through the grapevine that some people maybe in our parents' generation who are a little bit older than us, who I think have a deeper understanding of the work that Federation does, were displeased with our take. And to that I say, like, there's a messaging problem. Like, if it's so clear to our parents' generation what Federation does and what their benefit is, like something has gotten lost in the transmission of that deep understanding to us. And I am going to try to gain a better understanding of what Federation does.
I don't think people our age don't think like us. If you get what I'm saying, like I think you're going to find more people our age thinking like we think.
We may take for granted all of what the foundation that has been laid for us. So I'm just raising that as a possibility and for self-introspection and research. And last week and this week, I'm not taking a strong position one way or the other because I don't feel like I deeply understand Federations.
Hey, I welcome Federation's perspective. I've done a lot of work for Federation over the years. Like it's definitely got its places, and whether we take them for granted is very, very possible. It's very easy to take things for granted. So I appreciate the self-introspection for sure. But I think that because we deal with cross-generational work, like as rabbis, I've heard 80-year-olds for 20 years talking about the same sorts of topics in the same sorts of ways, and 40-year-olds for 20 years.
I mean, we should be steel manning these arguments a little more than just saying everything's horrible and it has to go away. That's my, my takeaway from last week.
Get on board with all of that.
Okay, let's table this.
Yeah.
And get into it.
Sure. So let's move on to actually a related topic. There was a piece in E-Jewish Philanthropy last week, I believe, by Rabbi Ari Witkin about the title was what does it mean to lead Jewishly? And it was about the nature of like big versus small tent Judaism, I guess, broadly speaking. Yedida, you read it, you had analysis, and you had some takes on it. Why don't you tell us what this piece was and what you were struck by?
So I, in thinking about how to sort of frame this, I'm going to talk about the piece we read about what a rabbi is by Yehuda Kurtzer from the Sources Journal in 2024. So both pieces are addressing that it seems that liberal Judaism has tried to increase Jewish engagement by democratizing Judaism and making it more accessible and meeting people where they are. And both pieces seemed also to be concerned that in raising Jewish leaders, for Kurtzer especially rabbis, but for Witkin, really any kind of Jewish leader, there's this concern that Jewish leadership doesn't have the depth of knowledge of Judaism and the Jewish tradition in order to be able to lead Jewishly. And Witkin formulates it, I think, really helpfully. And he points out that leading Jewishly means leading according to a particular set of principles and values for a particular tradition, for a particular group of people with particular obligations. And if we lose the Jewish piece, the particular piece, then we also, as Jews, lose our center. Both thinkers have different prescriptions about how to address this problem as they've identified it. And I want to throw it to Matthew, really, not to put you totally on the spot, because this is more, I think this is more your context. And you lead in a space that isn't a pulpit as a rabbi, if this accords with what you see.
I just want to be very honest, because I worked at the Shared Zedek for a total of 17 years, and for 5 of those, 1 as a rabbinic intern, 4 as a rabbi, with a co-rabbi who did the same program with me together, who was the cantor, Rabbi Annabelle Mas. He used Talmud a little bit more because he used it in some of the classes, study classes on Shabbat and things like that when we were working the pulpit. But it just didn't come up very much. It just doesn't come up very much in these kinds of settings. A deep knowledge of Talmud I would find ways to use it, but I'm not called upon to use it. Does that make sense?
So let me ask a different, better question. What were your responses to these pieces?
Are these two, how liberal are these two fellas who wrote these articles?
Oh, that's a good question, Yudit. How do you think Kurtzer defines himself? He's probably left of modern orthodoxy and right of traditional, current conservative mores.
Probably traditional egalitarian.
Let me ask you some, keeps kosher?
Yeah, I'd eat in his house, no problem.
Shomer Shabbat?
Yeah.
Knows when Shavuot is?
Oh, yeah.
You laugh, but 98% of the people who call me for something, wedding, funeral, bar mitzvah, the answer to those questions for them is no, no, no.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you got to get that, right? So liberal Judaism... It's hard to be a leader Jewishly in liberal Judaism when nobody keeps kosher Shabbat or knows when Shavuot is, and you do. That's a tough thing.
Let's just go back to the statement that you were bringing up there. Being a rabbi of a body of individuals who don't necessarily know when Shavuot is,
Well, I led off with kosher Shabbat
kosher
and
Shabbat
Shavuot.
and Shavuot. And that is actually the core of what Witkin is asking in this piece, is that he says there is a huge disconnect. People aren't really engaging Jewishly. And the reason why, in his mind, is because there is that collapse of Jewish literacy, not just amongst necessarily the rabbis, but amongst the lay population. The average Jew doesn't know these things, and they should, because this is part of the heritage of being Jewish, and not just, be a good person and, don't murder people. And the other piece was that the liberal communities have gone so far to make people feel comfortable where they're at that we no longer have this idea of what makes Judaism. And those two things need to be rebalanced in order for us to flourish as a Jewish community.
Right. I really do like a lot of that, except the one thing. So I brought up to somebody about this idea about Jewish literacy being down, because when I first read that, I agreed wholeheartedly. But my friend, who's often good at being a bit of a contrarian, brought up a really good point. He said it's just a different kind of Jewish literacy. And he pointed to the fact that long ago, you couldn't just walk down the street one day and say, I'm going to go study some Talmud. Where were you going to go do that? Where were you going to get your Talmud? Nowadays, any single person can go and get their Talmud. You can use the internet and you've got access. And so people can be specifically literate and are actually, because we live with our phones in our hands, will look things up right away in a sort of scholarly way that was impossible as far as Jewish literacy was concerned even 100 years ago. So while I think it's I don't want to say shameful, but it just makes me so crazy that people don't really know what Shavuot is and don't really know when it is. And I just use it as an example because like Passover is kind of obvious, Hanukkah is kind of obvious, but Shavuot, it's a biblical holiday. It's a pilgrimage festival. It's the day we got the Torah. And if I said to like any of my friends, when is Shavuot? They would all look at me blankly, and they went to Jewish school. Like, so that would point to a Jewish literacy problem. But this, my friend, he kind of suggested that it's just a different kind of Jewish literacy that reflects more, my point, that reflects more what Jewish people who are liberal, whatever that means again, care more about. They don't care about Shavuot, and therefore they don't know when it is, but they do care about, the trick is figuring out what X, Y, and Z are. I'm not sure that I agree with what the articles say the problem is. When I look around at the Jewish people that I see who have young families, who aren't members of synagogues, they overwhelmingly send their kids to Jewish camp. We have a Jewish school in Winnipeg that goes JK to 12, and they send their kids. A lot of people send their kids there, even if it's very expensive. Like I see people, a lot of kids participate in BBYO. People have mezuzahs on their doors. People come out for rallies for Israel. There's a lot of Jewish life. Do you know what I mean? Like I see a lot of Jewish life, but it's different because when my grandparents were young, people went to synagogue, and that isn't always a given. Like there are certain aspects of it that have changed, you know.
And that's a huge literacy difference depending on what your literacy priorities are. Totally.
The people I work with, they don't know their way around the synagogue service very much at all. No, they're looking for guidance in that, right? All those years of attending synagogue, it never worked for them, right? Like they went and it never worked for them.
It's a little sticky for me here, which is part of why I haven't said so much, other than to frame things. It's sticky on the right for me and sticky on the left because I don't want to be throwing stones at liberal movements. And I've been thinking about the medieval teaching that appears in both Christian medieval texts and Jewish medieval texts about standing on the shoulders of giants, but also the like Jewish concept of Yiri Dadha Darot, that like every generation is like diminished from the one before it, and previous generations were closer to Sinai, and we're just, losing Torah as we go, which is not something that like we like the idea of. And no, I grew up in a big conservative synagogue in Toronto that had the model, the old like 19th century German, conservative Judaism model of the scholar rabbi. And I like that model. I like Kurtzer's model of the rabbi should be the font of wisdom and knowledge and Torah and deep knowledge, and that being a rabbi means that you have that deep, deep Torah knowledge, and that doesn't necessarily make you good at all of the executive leadership pieces. But today we expect rabbis to do everything. And I think his claim is right. I think that we as like North American Jews have in a way like ruined the rabbinic profession because we expect rabbis to do everything and be everything all the time. And that is impossible. And that like rabbis should be entrusted with the tradition and passing it on. And you have to have a deep knowledge of that. And rabbi as conduit, and rabbi as like place you go when you can't understand a Torah passage or want to understand this value as opposed to that value and think that through. The other piece that's hard here is that like we've decided that elitism is bad, and like Kurtzer proposes as his solution sort of returning to this like altruistic elite rabbinic elite, and elite's a bad word now, but like maybe it shouldn't be, and maybe it is okay to recognize expertise. I was sort of thinking about this throughout like prepping for today, that my Google is not the same as your medical degree, and respectfully, like somebody looking up a passage of the Talmud in translation on Sefaria is not the same as a PhD in Talmud. Go ahead,
no question. How could it be? No way.
Okay, so I think that both of these pieces do something very, very well, which is observe, sort of figure out where some of the issues are by just observation and sort of seeing where there are some major issues. I think where they both fall short is in their prescriptions. the idea that like there is a collapse in Jewish literacy and that we need to be finding things that are specifically Jewish that binds us together and not just cultural and peoplehood, I think I agree with 100% that that's a problem that literacy has fallen through. Do I think that there are limits to how much, what it takes to meet people where they're at, as opposed to saying, well, this is what Judaism is. So in that sense, I think that, Witkin in the article is very right. Where I think Kurtzer is right is especially when he brings up the different models of leadership. And I remember hearing that done even in a better way by Hal Lewis, who was the head of Spertus Institute here in Chicago. And he wrote a whole book about, I think it was called From the Sanctuary to the Boardroom, where he lays out his whole model. He calls it the Ketaric model of leadership, right? Where the three ketars, the three crowns are there. So the three crowns are the crown of like political leadership. Then there's the wisdom, and then there's the avodah, the actual like ritual leadership. And those are three different things. The fact is, where I think Hal Lewis is wrong and where Kurtzer is right is that we expect all those things of the rabbis now. Rabbis are often doing that sort of leadership in the way of like saying we're political leaders, we are fundraisers, we are here as the voice of the community and not other people. Not you don't have the shtadlan, right, which is the term that we used to be used in the Middle Ages for the political head of the Jewish community that wasn't necessarily a rabbi. So we expect rabbis to be doing all of these things. And where Kurtzer, I think, is wrong is that he wants just a return to the scholarship model. Right. And I think that I have no problem with because Matthew, if I had to put it to those three things, Matthew, you are a liturgical leader for the most part when it comes to your rabbinate. You're doing a 100%. Lot of you're not doing a lot of scholarship, which is, I'm not complaining about it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong. And you're not the voice of Winnipeg Jewry. Right. You are that kind of person, that kind of rabbi. Well, you are on TSN, or you were.
Dare to dream. No, but I don't know. I mean, the second one, it's hard to talk about when it's me, but I would say that if you wanted somebody who's representative of a lot of Jews in Winnipeg and how they think,
it's you.
I would try and put my name in the hat for the rabbi with that answer.
Sure.
In all seriousness.
I'm saying where you are now, I guess is what I'm saying. I think I like the idea.
Okay. I agreed with you. I definitely, it's about these moments, right? Like with great respect, I love Yedida. I love what you said, but a PhD in Talmud wouldn't serve me because no one has ever called me ever into the question about Talmud.
So that's where Kurtzer's wrong, is that
my kid needs a bar mitzvah. We're getting married. My dad just died. Like that's when I get these phone calls.
Kurtzer assumes that he wants all the rabbis to do this. Right? Exactly.
Like
totally.
Come to the Hebrew school and come and teach and do the Megillah reading. So like those are the things where I find myself. Yeah. And so like any scholarly piece, like I think
what type of rabbi are you? That's I guess right. Where I was trying to say is, instead of being Kurtzer saying, well, all rabbis should be the elite scholars, right? Which is fine for some, but not necessarily for everybody, not what some people need.
No.
Right? What we need is the different rabbis and each acting in their own model. And sometimes you need an MBA rabbi, right, to be leading a congregation. And they're actually not going to be the rabbi who's going to give a ton of sermons, right? They're the ones who understand the community, who understands how to be with the people, how to speak to the public, and, in that way.
But I think that this is where Witkin comes in, and he says that all of the leadership, right, that the executive director of the shul also has to have some kind of deep Jewish literacy to be, because they're still leaders, and that like all Jewish leadership needs that, right? So I agree with you that like Kurtzer's like ivory tower model is not the everybody model, but I think that it is saying that like the thing that makes Judaism Jewish is Judaism.
This is a practice that, by the way, I highly recommend everybody do this for a little while. And I've been doing it for a lot longer because I guess I work for the Canadian Jewish News. And so I got to keep my ear across all Canada. I signed up for every federation in Canada just about's email list, so that I get like every Friday the weekly email from like Ezra Shankin in Vancouver and you're Slack in Montreal. And I get, Toronto, and I have Calgary, I have Winnipeg. And you can tell when somebody is really thoughtful and knowledgeable about their Judaism, and when it's some PR guy and marketing person just writing it out. And I like, and trying to insert something Jewish, and it's totally not in that person's voice. And I couldn't possibly agree more that when you see somebody who really has a deep Jewish knowledge, it totally changes the nature of like just reading that email and reading where they're coming from in their leadership. You feel so much more respect for them as a leader. At least I do.
I like that take. Again, I agree with that take.
Let me ask this question of both of you who have been sort of in different kinds of rabbinic leadership longer than I have. What is it about your rabbiness that makes you a good leader?
Nothing. It doesn't work that way for me.
So it's something else?
I would say that if I'm a good leader, it's because of me. It's not because of my rabbiness, and that makes me a better rabbi. Like, I would not say that there's anything inherent in the rabbiness that would affect my leadership. I don't believe that rabbis are inherently good leaders.
I'm not sure I'm a good leader, period. Same sort of thing.
an even more self-deprecating answer. I like it.
Let me frame it differently. I have observed, and you can tell me if you disagree, obviously, especially Avi, that Jewish communities see rabbi and they assume that you are a natural leader.
Yeah, I think that's true.
In positions of leadership.
That's not true. But, I'm saying I don't think that they automatically want to put you in a position of leadership. They will ask you to do something. But I think that there are many times now, and I bet you'll agree, Matthew, that the community sort of tokenizes your leadership. It's like, well, we're going to give the rabbi to give the Devar Torah at the beginning of the evening, but then we're never going to hear from the rabbi again. Right? So he's not really a leader.
That's a fair thing. And I also think that, unfortunately, and actually, I don't mean this about anybody now. I'm talking about more about in my youth. The quality of rabbis was not very strong. The rabbi of my synagogue, where I grew up, the rabbi of my bar mitzvah, I would never call him a leader. I would not call the guy before him a leader. I'm torn on whether the guy after him was a leader. And that was one synagogue, right? So, I mean, I think it's a leadership position, but so is being the boss of a company. And not every good boss is a good leader. That happens all the time.
To answer your question more specifically, Edita, because I do think there is something that I do that when people see it, I think they do feel like, oh, this is different. And this is somebody that I want to come back to for talking about Judaism, talking about Jewish stuff, is that I rarely will tell people what to do. You're asking me a question. This is what Judaism has thought about it in the past. I try hard and I say, look, I'm going to give you an Orthodox answer, but there's a non-Orthodox approach. And within Orthodoxy, there's this and there's that and there's that. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm going to tell you how to think about it. And I think that is talking specifically to somebody's deep Jewish knowledge, that's educating them and giving them the literacy that they need to actually go ahead and live their Jewish life, is to know the stuff, but then be given the option to make their own decision and to sort of say, okay, I have autonomy. I can go do that for myself.
So, Avi, on that note, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about your recent piece in the CJN Quarterly magazine Scribe about all different perspectives on Jewish astrology.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
Well, I just love the way you lay it out. I love how you've got these sources from all over, like classic texts. I love the topic. I've always been fascinated by astrology. I know my sign is Taurus, and I always find that interesting, and I read it more often than I should. But I also think it is completely and utterly ridiculous. Just a total waste of time. No validity to it whatsoever. I think that there's more to say about where people get born during the year in terms of those things that affect, and nothing to do with the stars and the moon, and it just sounds silly. So I got lots of time for like debates about its validity.
Yeah. So I started doing this feature. I started doing this feature for Scribe. We call it On One Foot, which was an allusion to Hillel, the scholar, Hillel the elder, Hillel Hazaken. Somebody asked him to teach him the entire Torah on one foot. And he tells him, yes, love your neighbor, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and the rest is commentary, go and learn. So I guess what we do, or we're trying to do, is to take one question that is of relevance to people in the world and currently, and then for me to like sort of introduce it, give a variety of sources, both ancient, medieval, modern, contemporary, and give my take on what these sources are and how do they speak to this actual question, and then wrap it up and to sort of say, look, I'm not going to tell you what to think about when it comes to reading your horoscope, but I also want to show you that there is a deep Jewish connection to it, but there's also rabbis who think that it's silly, the same way that like Matthew's like, yeah, it's all bullshit.
And Maimonides, like, let's be fair, I'm not exactly in by myself on an island. The Rambam was particularly harsh in what you pointed out and makes me look tame when I say completely and utterly ridiculous. Like, he wrote a letter to another country all about it, you point out. And I just think that stuff is fascinating. But I'm not alone here. I'm in good company. The Rambam.
Did you read your horoscope?
I used to, but mostly for fun. But I would sometimes, like, later in the day, like, interpret something that happened in light of the horoscope, right? Like, post facto.
It's the Delphic Oracle, right? Every time you read the horoscope, it's specifically designed to be as generic as possible. That's the way that I see it, especially contemporary. And people are going to, I'm sure, write in and tell me you're wrong, it's evil, whatever. But then again, I also want to leave room for people who do believe in it to say, look, there is a strong Jewish tradition of astrology, of reading, that's where Mazel Tov comes from, right? The term literally means, right, good luck, that hopefully that whatever happened or is about to happen was done under a good, astrological sign.
Was there ever anyone who was totally into it? Like, was really
Plenty.
Into it back in the day?
Totally. Even contemporarily, I found current Haredi rabbis that are writing books about how to like read your star chart properly, and that I have ancient Kabbalistic wisdom that was imparted to me by my teacher, who was imparted by his teacher, and it goes all the way back, right?
How do they get around the halakha that you talk about, though?
Well, Maimonides says something, but other rabbis say other things. It's always that is the nature of the rabbinic discourse, is that you'll always find somebody who disagrees.
Right. Yes. I'm having like memories of, I think Ibn Ezra like holds by it. I should look
Ibn Ezra.
I'm trying to remember. He was into a lot of stuff. Like, he wrote a big poem about coffee. He wrote another one about chess.
Astronomy and astrology, as I recall, again, like would have like are significantly overlapping. Mm-hmm. So he was big on science. He was a polymath. He knew he has all these like scientific writings also about like astronomy. So I think that given that like astronomy and astrology were basically overlapping fields of knowledge, that it plays in. I recall reading that like somebody was born under the Mazal, right? The constellation of so-and-so, and it's there. It's definitely there.
Yeah. So. Plenty of medievalists do believe in it. And
it's also when we talk about guys from 800, 900, even 700, 500 years ago, astronomy was way different. Like, astronomy was a totally different kind of mystery, uncertainty. I mean, how could it not, if you were a thinker, if you were somebody who was deeply interested in like some of the things we talk about, self-introspection, self-awareness, and just studying the world and searching for God everywhere, how could you not be fascinated by the stars? I mean, we know so much now in 2025, but in Ibn Ezra's time in the 1100s, I mean, they didn't know anything. This is like pre-Copernicus.
They knew a lot. They just didn't understand that Copernican revolution. That's why,
but they had the
I think them looking at the stars is very, very hard to compare with us looking at the stars. Is all I'm saying. Like, they looked at the stars with a totally different perspective. What do you mean? I mean, just because you guys are stuck in the Middle Ages.
You're totally right. But, apparently plenty of us still think that this, shapes the way our day and our lives are going to go.
Absolutely.
So
what are your,
Yedida,
you said you're a Scorpio, right? You're born in October maybe, or November?
November 2nd.
Right. I'm in May. I'm in the middle of May. I'm a Taurus. And Avi, what are you?
I'm in July. I'm in late July. I guess technically I'm a Leo, but I don't even identify with any of it. So I don't even like saying
in that range.
I'm in,
like, it's a fact.
And that's part of the bullshitness of it all, is that like technically, though there's been such a drift of like when these signs actually exist and where they are in the planetary, cosmos, the change of them shift from one month to the other, or from one sign to the other, is totally arbitrary at this point and has nothing to do with when these things were set up. So it's like, I'm not even going to go there. It doesn't matter. let's put a pin in that. I really encourage you to read it, of course, because I wrote it and it's so good. But
it's great.
Go check out the summer issue of Scribe Quarterly. There's a lot of other interesting articles in there. There's an interview I did with a Jewish farmer who runs the Jewish Farmer Network, which was really, really fascinating. I love doing that, but that's for a different conversation. Let us move on to our textual healing.
Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing. Let's get biblical. Tell me a parsha, and we'll make it physical. Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
Parshat Balak. Who has something interesting to tell us about Parshat Balak?
I think it's my son Hugo's bar mitzvah parsha, if we do it right, in 2032. It's one of my all-time faves, and I've always wanted to do like a Shrek, Balak, side by side, because for anyone who doesn't know, Shrek is that movie where the ogre has the little sidekick who's a donkey. Mike Myers and Eddie Murphy plays the donkey. And in Balak, the main character is not Balak, but Bilam, this wizard, magician, astrologer,
maybe. A prophet. That's all he is. He's just a prophet.
Yeah. He can curse people, though. He's like a hitman for hire with curses. And he's got a talking donkey, too. So I always kind of thought there was natural comparisons there. And I think that in both stories, like the answer always seemed to be a little too obvious. But in both stories, Shrek and Balak, like the donkey, this talking donkey is very kind of revealing for the main character, right? Like we learn a lot about the character. I was always fascinated in it as a character study, what Bilam is like. And, he gets hired to kind of curse the Israelites by Balak, this foreign king. And because Bilam is known for, being a curse hitman, as I like to say it. And he, every time he tries to curse them, he just gives them words of praise like Matovu. And he's just says some of the most beautiful things in the entire Torah. But on his way up there, he has this altercation with his donkey where he can't get his donkey going. And finally his donkey talks to him. And there's just not a lot of moments like that in the whole Torah, right? I think it's the only moment where an animal talks, if I'm not mistaken. In the Torah? Is that true? Like where else would an animal talk?
Ooh,
I think it's the only place in the Torah where an animal talks.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going...
And so that makes it like unique, special, and really wonderful. And because then in my lifetime, there was this talking donkey. And of course, the donkey in Balak has
the
one
snake.
line.
The snake talks right at the beginning.
Oh, nice. Good pull, rabbis. Good pull. We almost got carried away with that. Okay, well, the snake is pure evil.
Our listeners are going to tell us we are wrong. Yeah.
Hey, we got there, though. We got there. That was awesome. Good for you. That was awesome.
Anyone else? We'll see what other answers we get over the week.
So other than the terribly evil snake, we've got the talking donkey. And I don't know. I was always really drawn to it. It's a fascinating story for me, that donkey and Bilam.
What do you have for us, Yudita?
At some point, I don't remember where exactly it is in the Parsha, but in like one of the times where Bilam is telling Balak, and I always get their names confused, so forgiveness in advance. Bilam is telling Balak, I can't do this thing. I can't curse Israel the way that like you're trying to get me to do this, but I'll give you some advice. And so Rashi, bringing in from the Talmud and Sanhedrin, explains that the advice that he gives Balak is that basically he should have people seduce the Israelites to worship other gods. And so at the very end of our Parsha, we have the story of Pinchas. And because the Israelites have gone off and they've been worshiping this other god, Baal Peor, in very licentious, scandalous ways. And Pinchas impales this couple, as my father would say, in fragrant delecto.
Yikes.
Anyway, the Midrash like frames this whole thing that actually it was Bilam that told Balak, oh, you want the Israelites to fail? You just need to get them to do some avodah zarah. They should just like engage in some foreign worship. Their God will be upset with them and punish them. And like, there, I did you your favor. So he's not like prophetically cursing them, but he, is giving Balak some insider information that is true. Anyway, I love when Midrash sort of ties disparate pieces of a story together, even if it ignores that we're talking about like the Moabites, the Ammonite, like there's all the different nations are sort of mixed up into sort of one monolithic them. But anyway, it's a fun Midrash.
Yeah, the piece that strikes me, similar to what I've mentioned, I'm sure, in the past about Esav, right? And Esav isn't necessarily a totally, if you just read the words of the text, is not necessarily a totally evil person the way that we think or that we're taught. Until the very, very end, Bilam doesn't really do anything wrong, right? Bilam keeps telling, Balak, look, you're hiring me to do X. I'm not going to do X. I'm only going to do what I'm capable of doing, which is I'm a conduit. I'm the phone between the world and God. And when God gives me the message, I just give the message. And Balak's, yeah. He hears what he wants to hear. Balak is the evil one who's basically saying, yeah, I heard that you do all this cursing. And so you're going to curse these people, right? And he's like, no, right? I just say whatever comes to me from God. And that's all that I'm able to do. And then and Balak does it again. Yeah. You're going to curse them, right? You're going to curse them. He goes, no. And so every time that Bilam actually speaks, he's not doing anything wrong. There's none of this like internal struggle that the rabbis tell us about. They're like, oh, he was trying to curse because he's such an evil person, and yet he goes and he, against his nature, goes and says these words that God tells him. No, this is what the nature of prophecy is. Whatever the message is what you deliver, and that's Bilam all the way through until you get to the very end, which is not prophecy. This is his humanness coming forward and saying, yeah, these Israelites, I personally don't like them so much. God thinks they're great. I gave the message. I've praised them via God multiple times. But if you want to get to them, this is what you got to do. And then that's where he sort of turns. But until that point, he seems, and it makes me wonder what's going on in his mind. Was he always turned against the Israelites and he just kept telling Balak, right, I can't do what this is part of the job, but as much as I would love to, which we don't see? Or was he actually a fairly neutral prophet, and yet because of this turn of events and how his life got turned upside down, he ended up feeling a lot of animosity towards the Israelites, and he tells them, well, this is what you got to do. So I've always wondered what's going on internally there.
I like that. I've always thought that he just you bring in the story at the beginning where the donkey sees the angel and he doesn't see the angel, right? Mm-hmm. And he's so human. He's so relatable in spite of being a non-Jewish prophet, because I think at the beginning we are rooting for him, and throughout the story we're rooting for him, and yet at the very end, this guy still hired him, and this guy's probably going to pay him, and he gave him up, right? He's just Bilam is just a very, very relatable character. I think that, and it's got beautiful poetry in it. I mean, it's a really outstanding, but as a character study, it's like you said, Avi, we want him so badly to become the hero of the Israelites, right? He gets so close, and yet it just up and
you guys, it's another story in Bamidbar that I'm just not invested in.
Oh, Balak this is such a good parsha.
It's just I'm not into this drama. Talking donkey's not doing it for me.
The talking donkey's not doing it for you?
No.
Are you just a Leviticus fan? What are you into?
Yeah, maybe.
I didn't say Bamidbar is the best book. I said that by far Shmot is the best book.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in about two weeks. Yeah, that's right.
We're going to do that. The gloves are off in 2 weeks. What's the best book in the Torah?
Thank you for listening to Not in Heaven this week. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.